So today we're going to talk about civil rights. And the reason is because when I say civil rights, because of the civil rights movement, and because there has for so long in the United States and other countries been a battle to ensure that members of marginalized groups enjoy the same civil rights as members of the dominant group, people tend, when I say civil rights, people tend to associate that with, say, African Americans or smaller religious groups. But civil rights protects everyone. A civil right is simply protection of your social opportunities and also equal protection under the law. And the Bill of Rights outlines your civil rights. Freedom of speech is a civil liberty, which is a type of civil right. When you celebrate the fact that the Trump administration is weakening enforcement of civil rights protections, you probably don't realize that you are endangering your own rights and protections. So I want to explain this by talking about poll taxes, which have been repealed around the country. But a lot of people, if I say poll taxes, people understandably associate that with the efforts, widespread efforts, especially in the South, to disenfranchise African Americans, to make sure that they could not vote, which were extremely effective. When people were proposing poll taxes and passing these laws in the South, they were very open about what they were trying to do. But they were also relatively open about the fact that poll taxes were also going to prevent a lot of poor white people from voting. And they were totally okay with that. Let me read you from an article in the Montgomery Advertiser at the time, in the early 20th century. They said, the immediate removal of the cumulative feature of the poll tax burden would arm the dispossessed with a political power that the responsible citizens cannot afford to grant. The repeal of this article would invest the pauperized thousands of our people with the balance of power in Alabama politics. You saw articles like this all the time. They will tell you in all earnest that they are natural governors and it's better for the whole state as a whole to leave them with the advantage. They're talking about wealthy people there. They felt that they were the natural governors of everyone else. They honestly don't believe it wise to let North Alabamans vote their full strength. And in Northern Alabama was where some of the small farmers, generally white people, it wasn't the Black Belt, but white farmers who were poor or barely hanging into the middle class. And then you see this in the Birmingham Post, where they said the argument that the cumulative poll tax is to keep a certain racial element from voting is just so much camouflage. It has struck, the Southern planter wrote in Virginia, it has struck with devastating force the farmer vote, with deadly accuracy the lately admitted women vote, with utmost damage to the state, the labor vote. It paved a sure highway to an office-holding oligarchy and provided all the essentials for machine-dominated elections. And there they're talking about the political machine that they used to call, the parties, especially the local parties that ran politics. For a very, very long time, poll taxes were extremely effective, yes, at preventing African Americans from voting, but at preventing low-income white people from voting, even middle-income and low-income white people from voting. When you are struggling to pay your bills, when you are living paycheck to paycheck, then paying that money to vote seems like an unnecessary expense, and you don't do it. These poll taxes that some people supported because they thought they were disenfranchising Black people, they didn't realize it was disenfranchising them. And so an oligarchy, the wealthiest in the South, took over, and they kept power for a very long time. And that's another thing that's about weakening civil rights, is that when you allow a very wealthy, powerful minority to take over the levers of government, it's really hard to get rid of them. And I say that because if you take a look at when they were able to finally reveal these poll taxes. First of all, a lot of people, when they realized what was going on, began to fight against poll taxes and try to get them repealed. And we're not talking about just African American civil rights organizations. We're talking about a huge number of organizations like the Consumers League, the League of Women Voters, Business and Professional Women's Clubs, the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Just a dizzying number of organizations that were predominantly white Southerners came out against poll taxes. For decades fought poll taxes, but it is so hard to dislodge a wealthy minority that many of these laws weren't repealed until 1966. The Voting Rights Act was passed into law in 1965, and many of these poll tax laws weren't repealed until after that, meaning they didn't get repealed until they had to be repealed. Mississippi, Arkansas, 1964, Texas, 1966, South Carolina, 1951, but still decades later, Tennessee, 1953, Virginia, 1966. What I'm trying to say is that these poll taxes hurt everyone who was not powerful and wealthy, that a large number of white people realized that it was preventing them from voting and fought against it, but they could not break the stranglehold that this wealthy oligarchy had in the halls of power for decades. So when we're sitting here, when some people are sitting here celebrating the weakening of civil rights protections, civil rights enforcement, I ask that you think again. It is not a good thing. And it's not just not a good thing for somebody who doesn't look like you. It's not a good thing for you. Have a good day and be kind.